Hey everyone, and welcome to this Thursday's edition of the Education Helpline. We are excited to bring you our next series of information and activities that you can use with your families. We know we're rolling into summer, so a lot of you are not in the formal education mode anymore, and that's fine. But we hope to bring you some good information, some fun activities that you can do with your families over the next couple of weeks. So, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be focusing on the sixth ocean literacy essential principle, which is the ocean and humans are inextricably interconnected. That's a mouthful to say, but what that means is it's designed to show us just how much we are connected to the ocean, how much the ocean impacts our daily lives, as well as on the flip side of that, how we also impact the ocean. Now, we're on our sixth ocean literacy essential principle. There are five previous ones that we've gone over, and we have one more that we're going to be doing next week, which will round out our series. But if you're interested in learning about all seven ocean literacy essential principles, Kristen Gehring, who is our marine educator with South Carolina Sea Grant, she is going to be manning the comment box there and will be posting links throughout the session. So she will probably be posting that ocean literacy essential principle link at some point during today's session so you can read all about all seven principles. And if you are interested, you can also check out our archived Facebook Live sessions that are on our Sea Grant Facebook page if you would like to tune in to any of our other videos that we've done over the past several weeks. So it's called an education helpline for that very reason. If you are tuning in and you have a question about anything that we are showing or sharing with you, please feel free to comment in the box with your question, or you can just say hello and tell us where you're from. We'd love to know who's tuning in with us today. So my name is Evie Bell, and I'm the Marine Education Specialist with the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium here in Charleston, South Carolina, and excited to be here today. Now, today, unfortunately, we were supposed to be out on Folly Beach today, shooting live and in person with you. But we got rained out last week, and sounds like we're going to be rained out today as well. So we are moving everything inside today. So we'll make it as just as exciting as we were out on the beach, although nothing take quite as like when you're out in the field, but we'll do our best to bring you some great information and some exciting things to show you throughout the session. So, last, excuse me, our last session, Kristen shot live out in the salt marsh ecosystem. So, what I wanted to do is feature one of our other really critical and very interesting ecosystems along our coastline, which is the Barrier Island ecosystem. And you might know those better called as beaches, and I'm sure that you have at least heard of the beach, and some of you might be vacationing to the beach or going out for the day to fish. But most of the beaches that we have along our coast are considered to be barrier islands. So we are going to be talking about how unique these habitats are. And so the next time you go out to the beach, you'll be thinking about, oh, I'm on a barrier island. It's a cool place to be. So what I wanted to do though is back up and talk a little bit about this principle that we're all connected. The ocean, as we've talked about in previous weeks, impacts everyone, no matter where you live, on the coast, inland, no matter where you are. From the air we breathe, when you breathe in, on your exhale, make sure you thank the ocean because most of our oxygen comes from ocean plants. Our climate and our weather, driven almost, maybe not exclusively, but the majority influenced by the ocean. So everything we do and everything we experience probably has some link back to the ocean. So along those same lines, I wanted to mention one topic that we could probably spend weeks and weeks on, which is talking about the concept of watersheds. And this is a really great way to talk about how we're connected to the ocean, but also how we're connected to each other. And so I want to mention that kind of as our backdrop for talking about, we're going to segue over to barrier islands here in a second, but we're going to talk a little bit about watersheds just to kind of get in mind this concept that we're all connected. So the map behind me, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, but the map behind me, this is a map of South Carolina's rivers and watersheds. It's one of my favorite maps I use to teach. Not only it's just great with the detail, but you can see the different colors of the map, and these different colors represent the major watersheds in our state. Now, a watershed is simply where lots of bodies of water keep combining and they drain out into a larger basin or body of water. So, for example, our rivers here in Charleston, we've got the Ashley, the Cooper, the Wando, and the Stono. Those are rivers, and as part of that watershed, they flow down and they empty out eventually into the Charleston Harbor, which is an estuary. So that same principle happens all around the state. And so when we talk about our watershed address, that is, what watershed do you live in? And every one of us lives in a watershed. And so what is your watershed address? So if you look, there are these huge sections of the state are considered to be part of a watershed. So if you go outside your house and you think about the closest creek or the river next to you, that is linked up to a larger watershed. And so whatever happens in that watershed um, flows down and impacts people downstream from you in the watershed, and as well people upstream from you, up that creek or up that river. Whatever they're doing impacts your area. So, for example, if trash or litter gets into that watershed, you might impact people downstream, and also people upstream might impact you. Okay. So the reason why I bring this up is that, have you ever wondered about why we've got some really interesting names with our creeks and rivers in South Carolina, no matter where you go? Living here on the coast, we have some really great names like Waccamaw and Edisto, Santee, some really great names. And if you do a little digging around about the names of the creeks and rivers in your area, what you're going to find is probably something really, really interesting that speaks to the cultural connections or the history of the area. So it could be the use of the watershed or the creek in the area for mill purposes or agriculture. It could be a famous person, or it could be a community. And a lot of the names of rivers and creeks, especially in our area, like the Waccamaw, Edisto, they're named after Native American tribes that inhabited the area hundreds and even thousands of years ago. And so, if you do a little digging around, you can figure out and learn about not only the culture and historical significance of um, people and cultures and events and the uses of that area, but you can also figure out how you connect to the larger watershed. So there's a really neat activity that you can do. It is a formal lesson plan, but you can do this with any roadmap you can get from the DMV. But you can research the name of the creek or river in your area, and then what you want to do, you can take these little sticky dots and you can trace your river, you can figure out how you're connected to the larger watershed in your area. So, for example, say I live in Orangeburg County, I'm going to connect to the Edisto River. And as I follow that Edisto River, I'm going to find, and I'm placing stickers just a little bit further down this watershed. I'm going to follow that watershed down and see where it ends up. And the Edisto River is the longest free flowing blackwater river in the United States. It's not the longest river, it's the longest free flowing blackwater river in the United States. And what I'm going to find is that me living up here in Orangeburg County, my watershed flows all the way down until it empties out into St. Helena Sound, right around Colleton County, right near Edisto Beach. That's how long that watershed is. And it's actually longer, it goes a little bit further up. So it's a really great activity that you can do. It doesn't have to be in a formal classroom, but you can do that if you want to pull in some culture and some social studies, as well as talk about watersheds. So that is Creek Cultural Connection, and you can find that on our education webpage. Don't know if it's posted quite yet, but it will be. And under today's session, you can find a link to that activity. So now we've made it all the way down our watershed, down to the coast, and we have now emptied out right around Edisto Island or Edisto Beach. And if you've been to Edisto Beach, that is an example of a barrier island. Now we have 35 barrier islands on along our coastline, and these islands are they're not only super important, but they're fascinating. They're always called dynamic, and dynamic is means that they're constantly changing. Okay. So another island that we have along, if we go up a little bit further, Folly Beach. Folly Beach is where we were supposed to be today, shooting live and in person. And one cool thing about Folly Beach, not only is it a barrier island, but also when you look at the history of that name, when I think of the word folly, folly to me, spelled Folly, folly to me means foolishness and silliness. When you hear the word folly, I think silly. People are being silly. And you can see some really silly stuff out on Folly Beach. But the reason why it was named Folly Beach was because when people first discovered Folly Beach from crossing the Atlantic, one of the first places of land that they saw was this stretch of sand with a very dense vegetation. And the people on that ship were from England, and the English word for folly means dense vegetation. So dense trees and shrubs. And so they came upon this after a long journey across the Atlantic Ocean. And the first word that came to mind was folly, because that's what they saw, this dense vegetation, this dense shrubbery. And so Folly Beach is what it's been named ever since. So it's pretty cool. Digging around a little bit on history. And again, you do see some silly stuff out at Folly, but that's not why it was named that way. So Folly Beach, Edisto Beach, and 33 other barrier islands along our coastline are considered to be barrier islands. They are dynamic. And what that means is that they're constantly on the move, which is super, super interesting. One of the main reasons we love barrier islands is because they are our first line of defense. When you go out to the beach and it's a barrier island here on the coastline, you can only go so far before you reach waves. Okay, so those waves are constantly pounding the shoreline. Barrier islands absorb a lot of that energy. They're basically our first line of defense for wave energy, storm surge. When big storms come up the coast, barrier islands are just that. They're a blockade. Think about it as a natural barrier. It's in the name. So they do serve as our first line of defense. We've talked about salt marshes and estuaries. Salt marshes are also another great barrier. But barrier islands are right out there in front, absorbing all that wave energy and storm surge and things like that. So they can really help with flooding and impacts of storms. But consequently, they're always on the move. So I've got a little diagram here, and this is a barrier island. Now, I'm not an artist at all, so this is my terrible rendition of a barrier island. But barrier islands move in a variety of different ways. If you're walking up the beach, so say you're on the beach and you're beachcombing, and this is where the water is right here. These are where the waves are coming in, and you're walking along the beach, looking for shark's teeth or whatever. Um, you'll notice if you reach the end of the island, one end is going to be very, very narrow, like over here. You think I would have gotten used to how to do this? So one end is very narrow, okay? The other end is a lot larger, looks almost like a drumstick. We say that they often look like drumsticks. So it's because there is a current that is running along almost parallel to the island, and it's transporting sand. So on one end, you're going to have erosion, making it much smaller over here. And then also depositing sand at the other end, or accreting and building up. Okay, so one end, so it's always dynamic with one end losing sand, one end gaining sand. Okay, you can go out a couple of weeks from now and the beach is going to look different. That's just because it's very dynamic. Barrier islands also move the other way. So barrier islands actually roll over on themselves. They'll either roll inland or they'll roll out to sea. So not only do you have this long ways movement, but you also have it moving in and out. So they are always on the move, which is so fascinating because every time you go out, it's going to look a little different. And especially after a storm, they can look very, very different. So barrier islands not only are a great protection for our communities, but they also host a lot of really, really interesting animals and plants along their shores. And if I was out today, I was going to point out a few things that some important plants that are federally protected. I couldn't bring them in to show you, but one of the foundational plants that the beaches have are sea oats. And if you go out to the beach, and sea oats are federally protected, you can't pick them up, you can't even possess part of the plant. They are that important. But sea oats, when they grow, they have such an extensive root system that when you see the beautiful top of the plant, and underneath, though, you have just feet and feet, sometimes meters and meters of root systems that what they're doing are stabilizing dunes. And dunes on a barrier island are the characteristic piece, what helps to build up that island through these dunes and also helps to stabilize the island. So you've got some really important plants out there. So if you ever see signs that say, don't walk on the dunes and don't pick the sea oats, don't do it, because if we didn't have those sea oats, we wouldn't have dunes and we wouldn't have anything that stabilized this island, so that we could actually have a beach to go out and enjoy. So very, very important plant. Okay. But I did bring some of the beach to us today. Not as exciting as doing this out and in person, but I did go out early this morning at low tide, to see what the ocean had washed up for us, for today. And the cool thing, if you don't know this, we have two high tides and two low tides. That means we have two opportunities during the day to go out when there's a tremendous amount of beach. So, and you'll see differences in between those tidal cycles. You may find certain shells and animals one time when you go out, and you may go out 6 hours later and find a whole host of new things. So it's always exciting to go out to the beach to see what has been deposited there. So I did bring a few things, some living, which are going to go back to the ocean, and some not. But I wanted to show you some of the common things that you might find as you walk down the beach. If you go to the beach this summer, maybe there's some things, these are some of the common things you probably are going to see. So I picked some of my favorites selfishly, but also some of the very common ones that you'll find. So always remember, if you do find, say, a shell like my friend, the channeled whelk here, excuse me, knobbed whelk. I think I know what I'm talking about yet. This is the knobbed whelk. You always want to make sure that there is nothing living inside. You want to make sure you look good and close, because sometimes animals can tuck their ways very far up the shell, like a hermit crab, um, and you don't want to hurt the animal or the actual animal that made the shell. So if you see anything living in it, just put it back down. I guarantee you'll find other really pretty things to take home. So just be very careful of that. Um, so I wanted to show you one of the common shells that you can find on the beach is what's called the knobbed whelk, and the knobbed whelk is very, very common. We have what are considered to be right-handed and left-handed whelks. Whelks, that means I can put my right hand in very comfortably into the shell here. We also have left-handed whelks. They're a little bit more rare, but that means I can put my left hand into that opening here, right here. But these are considered to be mollusks. They have a hard shell and a soft body. So the animal that made this looked like almost like a giant snail. And as long as that snail is alive, it continues to wrap that beautiful shell around itself for protection. Once that animal has died, the shell is empty, and you might get a hermit crab, which I'll show you in a second, inhabiting this shell. Okay, so a close cousin, and one kind of interesting cultural piece with this, the knobs on the knobbed whelk were actually used as jewelry and currency with some of the local Native American tribes. So such a beautiful shell, used for a variety of different ways. This is often considered confused with a conch. We have one species of conch, the horse conch here. So this is a whelk. Oftentimes they get changed up, which is understandable. They look almost exactly alike, but these are indeed whelks. Okay. The next whelk that is very close cousin, one of the most beautiful shells, I think, is the channeled whelk. Okay, so you can see the difference. You've got kind of the whorls here, and then you've got the knobs here. So they look very different. Okay. So again, this is a close cousin, and it's right-handed opening here. Um, so again, this was a fairly sizable channeled whelk, and again kept growing that shell around it as it continued to live. And what's neat about both of these guys is you can find them on the beach, but you can also find them on oyster beds. They use the edge of the shell right here to actually open up oysters and eat the oysters or any other mussel, but they use that edge to eat their prey. So they are carnivores. All right, so I'll pause here and see if we have any questions here. So yes, so I'm going to take a quick pause and talk about the map. The map that I have behind me, teachers can get a copy of it if you just send us an email, and I can put you in contact with where you need to get a copy of this map. I believe you can get a hard copy still, and if not, I believe it's been digitized, so you can have an electronic version of it, and then you can print it out as many copies as you want. Great question. And then a free-flowing Blackwater River. Thanks for that question. I kind of glossed over that. So a Blackwater River. So free-flowing means that there's no dams. There's no obstruction in its flow path. Okay. Several rivers have been dammed in the history of South Carolina for various purposes. But free flowing means it's not dammed. So from the headwaters all the way down to the termination point, that river flows without any obstruction. And black water is a great question. Black water means that there are tannins in the water. And if you ever look at the Edisto River, it looks, if you let the sunlight hit it just right, it looks like tea almost. So kind of that color of tea. And that's because when leaves drop off into the water, the tannins get leached out and it gives kind of this brownish or blackish Blackwater River color to the water. So it doesn't mean it's dirty. It's just because of the tannins that are leached out of the plant matter of the plants that are along the banks of the river. So that's a great question. So thanks for that. I love the Edisto River, and that's a really fun point to bring up. So thank you for that. And then the other question is what makes barrier islands roll in and roll out versus longshore current moving sand up and down? So that's a great question too. So longshore drift or longshore current actually transports sand up and down the coastline, and the rollover with the islands has to do with sometimes with the wave energy, but also just the dynamic of the entire island vegetation and all that. So, and they can roll out towards the ocean or back inland. So if you ever see pluff mud out on the beach, that's a great sign that, or a boneyard beach, that is a great sign that that beach has been rolling over on itself. So thank you for those questions. All right, so back to our beachcombing session here. So the a couple of other species that I have, I saw parts of these today. This is a sand dollar. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about the different phyla last time, but this is part of the Echinodermata phylum. And um, sand dollars right now, when they're this beautiful white color and they're bleached out, I know that they are dead and I can pick them up. If you ever find a sand dollar that's kind of a greenish, brownish color, it's almost spiky to the touch, it's living. And so you want to make sure that when you see a sand dollar, you want to make sure that it's not living. And when they're this color, you're good to go. They're beautiful shells and related to things like the sea urchin. Again, this is another close cousin of the sand dollar. The sea urchin, this is what's called a test. So, not like a test that you have in school, but a test is the actual skeleton that's left behind. When a sea urchin, if you've never seen a sea urchin before, these creatures are really beautiful. When they are alive, they've got all sorts of spines covering their bodies. Sometimes they're really long, sometimes they're really short, depending on the species, and the mouth is actually underneath the sea urchin here. When this sea urchin died, when all those spines fell off, it left behind its skeleton, which we call a test. And I think they're honestly one of the most beautiful things you can find on the beach. Again, if you do see a living sea urchin, it's not going to look anything like this. It's going to have spines coming out all over it. Just admire it from afar. I guarantee you'll probably find parts of these on your beach walk. So sea urchins here. One of the last things I want to show, this is our state shell. This is the lettered olive. It is actually closely related to our other mollusks here. This is a mollusk. This is a lettered olive, and if you look kind of close, if you look at the markings, there are other olive shells in existence, but the lettered olive looks like they're letters written on the shell, and so it got its name, lettered olive. This is our state shell. So this is a beautiful shell. Right now, if you're walking along the beach, if you see underneath the sand, if you see this kind of long, looks like something's been digging underneath the sand and it's really long and thick, dig and you'll probably find a live lettered olive. The live lettered olives are beautiful. They're going to have almost like a snail looking animal here. So if you do find a live one, just look at it, admire it, put it back underneath the sand, let it do its thing. Anything that's empty, you can enjoy. And this morning, I found, speaking of living, I found, see if I can show it before it goes back in its shell. But I found what is, you probably find these shells pretty commonly. These are moon snails, and this guy is actually alive. So you can see that really awesome animal that is inhabiting that shell. It looks like a snail, okay? And these guys are typically typically are crawling around underneath the sand looking for food. These guys are pretty voracious carnivores. Okay, they won't hurt us, but they are looking for something to eat. Now, when they do find something to eat, I'll show you. So this is another common shell here. This is called an incongruous arc. Okay. Now, the reason why these are really common on the beach, you'll see these all the time. But I can tell you right now how this animal died. That hole right there, now that hole's really cool. When I was little, I thought, "Ooh, I can make a necklace. It's just for me. I can make a necklace out of it." And you can. Looks like the perfect opportunity to make some jewelry. But I know because of that hole that a moon snail dined on this animal. So what the moon snail can do, and I've got actually a bigger one here who's live and cruising around here. What the moon snail does, he's hanging out of a shell pretty good. What the moon snail does is the moon snail has um, an apparatus that acts like a drill, and it actually can drill a hole into this shell right there and actually eat the animal out of its shell. It's pretty cool, kind of sad. But I know how this animal died because of that hole. The moon snail is the culprit. So, but moon snails are pretty common right now. You're going to probably see their shells, or if you see them underneath the sand, kind of like the lettered olive. If you see a little rise in the sand and you see it kind of making a tunnel almost, dig it up, look at it. It won't hurt you, but put it back underneath the sand, and you'll probably um, you know find a live moon snail. I found these this morning. No doubt hungry because they were cruising around. Just the last couple, I'm going to show you my little friend. I know Kristen showed one of these last week, but this right here is a hermit crab, obviously super friendly. But this shell right here is the banded tulip snail, okay? So much like the whelks, it had almost like a snail animal on the inside that made the shell. Once that animal, this guy's super friendly. Once that once that snail um, died, it left behind this beautiful shell, and this hermit crab decided to make it its home. So this hermit crab is using the shell. That's why you always want to make sure that you check before you take a shell home. I checked and I saw one little claw in this. He was tucked way back up in there, but I saw one little claw. And as soon as I put him in some water, he was out and running around. So I'm glad I didn't keep him out so that I didn't want to hurt him. But the last thing I want to show, I know I've got one more minute, I could talk forever about this stuff, as you can probably tell. But one of the things that I absolutely love to look for are shark's teeth. And I found quite a few this morning. Um, Now, I actually saw a shark feeding this morning, which was really, really interesting, very small, about 3 feet. But I saw a shark feeding all along one of the oyster clumps right there in the surf. It was really, really neat. But I have, might be kind of hard to see, but I did find a couple of shark's teeth this morning. And sharks are really amazing creatures. They probably are one of the more misunderstood creatures. Usually, when we hear about sharks, we hear about shark attacks. And the thing that we think about the most with sharks are these guys right here, the teeth, right? And this is probably not a huge shark, but I can tell you how sharp these are. That yes, I would not want to be on the business end of the shark here. But lots of different species of shark that we have, and I found a bunch of shark's teeth this morning. And sharks, because they are made primarily of cartilage, which is the stuff in our noses and our ears, it's very, very kind of pliable. um, their teeth are sitting in a jaw that's made out of cartilage, and so every time they eat, they eat, pretty aggressive when they eat. So when they eat or chomp down on something, they're going to lose teeth because our teeth are rooted in bone here. Okay. Theirs aren't. And so when they take a bite, a lot of times they're going to lose teeth after each feeding. So if you find a lot of shark's teeth on there, there might be a lot of sharks out there, but probably it's just kind of reiterating the fact that sharks, when they eat, lose teeth. And that's why they have a row of teeth behind, to 6 or 7 rows sometimes of teeth ready to take its place. So if you ever look at a shark jaw, turn it over and you'll see rows of teeth ready to take that tooth's place because of that reason. So sharks' teeth are pretty interesting creatures. They have 7 senses. We have 5. They have 7. They're pretty interesting creatures. So I can talk about that forever too. But saw a lot of really neat things today on the beach. Good stewardship. I just want to end with that. Good stewardship on the beach. I touched on a couple of things. When you see those signs about not walking on the dunes, that's because those dunes, if we didn't have those dunes, we would not have a barrier island and we wouldn't have these wonderful beaches to go to. So crawling on a dune is oftentimes not a good idea. One person, maybe not such a big deal, but think about if every single person on a holiday weekend crawls over those dunes, they're gonna be damaged. The same with the plants that are protected. Those plants are so important in stabilizing those dunes that we need for the beach. So the second thing is, right now it is turtle season. Yay, turtle season. So turtle season and shorebird nesting season. So if you go out to the beach and you see these signs and it's roped off, you know that a sea turtle nest has been found. Please don't disturb it. I know it's exciting, but those eggs are trying to mature and get ready to hatch so that they can make their way out to the ocean. Same goes for if you see I don't have a sign, but if you see a roped off area with shorebird signs, that means that there are shorebirds that are nesting there. A lot of shorebirds nest right directly in the sand, and their eggs are so well camouflaged to the sand that if you walk through there, you run the risk of stepping and cracking one of the eggs. So just be aware if those areas are roped off, it's for a reason. Um, Also, if you have a dog, I love to let my dog run free. All she wants to do is run. She just wants to run. I would love to let her run at Folly Beach, but they have rules in place which I follow. A, she's on the leash at all times. And B, there's certain hours of the day and certain hours during the season where she's either not allowed on the beach at all, or it's a restricted access. So just make sure you know the rules in your area. They're there for a reason. Because we have turtles nesting on the beach close to me, which is Folly, um, and shorebirds nesting there, that those rules are in place for a reason. The same thing is too, if this goes for anywhere you are, but if your dog does go to the bathroom, please pick it up. There are lots of animals and plants that need a healthy ecosystem. So please pick up your dog waste. This number is probably a little bit different, but years ago, there was a statistic that came out from the Department of Health and Environmental Control that Charleston County alone produces 10,000 pounds of dog waste a day. 10,000 pounds of dog waste a day. So by picking it up, we try to remove the potential for a lot of bacteria to get into our waterways and sicken some of the plants and animals that we really like to see and also consume. So just make sure you pick that up. And lastly, when you're out on the beach, if you see a piece of trash and it's safe to do so, like plastic bag or aluminum can, and it's safe to do so, you don't want to hurt yourself, um, do your part and maybe challenge yourself to take one piece of trash off the beach, along with your own, and put it into the trash can. This is a great little stewardship way that we all can do, to protect, not only our beaches but just our waterways in general. So, and our ocean overall. So well, thank you all for joining us. I know I went a little bit over my 30 minutes. I could talk about this stuff all day. I'm sorry we couldn't do it out on the beach today, but we will try to get a live session out there so you're not staring at the conference room wall. But enjoy enjoy the beach this summer. And if you're interested in learning more about Barrier Island ecology, we have a great resource on our website. It's called Of Sand and Sea, and it's written by Dr. Paula Keener Chavis and Dr. Leslie Sauter. They're two fabulous marine educators, as well as Dr. Sauter is a scientist here at the College of Charleston. So they put together this publication. It is excellent in learning about our shoreline and talking more about barrier island dynamics and how barrier islands move. The other resource is our Coastal Heritage Magazine. This is one of our most recent issues, and it goes over the current research that's going on our barrier islands. And you can see when I talked about shorebirds, this brown pelican right here is one of the bird species that research is being done on, and one that we're concerned about. Or concerned about meaning devoting time and energy to doing research. So check out these. These are on our website. You can check these out, download them for free, and learn more about it. So again, if you have questions, you're welcome to post any questions that you have in that chat box. And if not, I'll also check my phone. We're also taking questions over the phone as well. And two questions, which again, I could do a whole session on shark teeth. That's all I did as a kid was look for shark's teeth. But tips for shark's tooth hunting, that's great. I always look for contrast. I go to areas of the beach where it's not a lot of shell. And I walk the beach and I look for something that's a little bit shiny, triangular, and black. And it a lot of times will show up a little bit better when there's not a whole, like if you're around shells that are this size right here, you might not see these smaller shark's teeth. So go to an area where the shell is really fine and you'll probably see them. Also, take your time, crouch down, look around, and just take your time, and you'll find some. And the other question was, what are the two extra senses of the shark? Great question. So our senses are sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. Sharks have those five, but sharks also have two additional ones. One is they have a lateral line. So a lateral line, fish also have this, but a lateral line, which is a line that goes down horizontally the length of the fish. And the shark can, that line, they're not true hairs, but if you blow up that line under a microscope, it looks like little hair structures all along that line. And though that lateral line is able to detect movement in the water, so it's almost like a touch. It's almost like a touch sense, but it can sense vibration in the water. So if a fish is sick and floundering around in the water, the shark can sense that vibration and might go check it out. The other sense is it's a fancy name, um, but it's called ampullae of Laurentini. Laurentini, yeah, 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 ampullae of Laurentini. But anyway, what that means underneath a shark, if you look at it, there are little what look like freckles. Okay, they're little dots underneath the jaw of a shark. And what those are little sensors, and what those are able to do are pick up electromagnetic pulses. Now it sounds really fancy, and who cares, and why does that matter? Well, if you imagine a fish or an animal that is trying to hide from a shark, okay, trying to take cover, is camouflaged, is not making any movement at all, not making a sound, well camouflaged. How is that shark going to still find that prey? There's one thing that's still moving in a fish, and that's the heart. So every time your heart beats, it's putting out this electromagnetic pulse. And so sharks are able to detect a heartbeat, even if something is very, very still in the water. So pretty interesting. So that's why they have seven senses at their disposal to try to find things to eat. So not to scare you, but it's just pretty cool that they've evolved to have seven senses to help them survive. So so great questions. Thanks for that. Sharks are a personal interest of mine. So um, Yes, ampullae of Lorenzini. I knew that didn't that didn't sound right. Thank you, Kristen. I was like, Lorenzini doesn't sound right. Yes, ampullae of Lorenzini. Thank you. With a Z, not a T. Yeah, those are those little dots underneath the sharp jaw. So, all right. Well, thank you all again for joining us, and hopefully next time we'll be able to shoot live. But until that time, just let us know if you have any questions about anything we've talked about today. And I hope you have a good rest of your week. And we will see you next week as we cover Ocean Literacy Essential Principle number 7, which deals with ocean exploration. And this will be our last Facebook Live session. So make sure you tune in. Take care, guys.